Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody. If you're visiting with us, we're glad that you're here. We are on Lesson 8 of the Ten Commandments. So if you have a book, I looked on the back and I didn't see any more books. But if you're in the book, it's Lesson 8 on page 43. So pages 43 to 48. So it's Lesson 8. It is the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not murder. So, like I mentioned a few weeks ago when I was teaching class, Buddy has a way of giving you topics that are very small amount, but having a lot to talk about. So tonight and Wednesday night, we have 4 words that we're going to have 2 lessons out of. So, and there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of good material that we can talk about and study. Before we get into that, and I know Buddy was just able to have one lesson on Lesson 7, honoring our aging parents. If you did not get a chance, there is a sheet there are some sheets that are on this back table. So what is that? That is the Northeast table. Front and back, it's entitled, Honor Your Aged Father and Mother. So if you did not get a chance to get a copy of this, I encourage you to do so, and we can get some more copies if need be. But there's a lot of great material in here, and it's a lot of material that is from members here at Livingston about honoring our aged parents. So if you did not get a chance to look at that, I strongly encourage you to do that. So tonight, like I mentioned, we're on Lesson 8. What I'd like to do tonight, we'll see how far we get. What I'd like to do tonight is we'll reread the text, and we'll read the whole text of Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 17, because I'd like to, again, look at where this sixth commandment fits into all of the 10 commandments, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we'll then start diving deep into what is the importance of this commandment and why God gave this commandment to his people, and then we'll talk about some lessons and applications. So Noni asked me tonight, she said, well, will we have some charts? And I lied. I had forgotten. We will have some charts. They're not going to be the typical charts, but we will look at some charts tonight. Before we get started, I've asked Michael if he would to lead us in an opening prayer. Michael?
Please pray with me. Dear God, our Father, we are thankful, dear Lord, for the day that we've had, for the family that surrounds us this evening. We pray that we will listen to your word as it is presented to us so that we can look inwardly and make applications. Help us to strengthen and encourage one another, to turn our focus to you and know that you are always there for us. It's through your Son we pray these things. Amen.
Amen. All right, so let's all turn to Exodus chapter 20, and I've asked Ed, Brother Ed Fox, to be our reader tonight. So he's going to read starting, the first reading will be Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. So Ed?
All right. And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to thousands who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, so do you remember this chart? This chart is where we looked at the 10 commandments, and on the left-hand side, the first 4 commandments are related to the relationship with God, that there's no one else before God, don't make any graven images to God. Everything on that left-hand side is about our relationship with God and how he wants a relationship with us, and then how we are to worship him. And then on the right-hand side is all about the relationship with others. And so we started last week talking about honoring your father and mother. So that's the first commandment that starts talking about this relationship that we have with other people here on earth. So now we get to the next one where he says, thou shalt not murder. So as we think about the ordering of these commandments, is there anything that jumps out to you? And again, I may be overthinking this, but is there anything that jumps out to you about why God put these commandments in this particular order? Why he would say, for example, honor your father and mother, and then after that is do not murder, and then after that is do not commit adultery. Anything about that particular order? We got a mic coming to you. Jessica.
I have a note written here in my Bible. I don't have a note as to who said this, but it's pointing to the you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, and it's telling us when you do these things, it tells us our relationship with God is not enough. And then when it's talking about the coveting, going back to the first 4 things like that, God's relationship needs to be enough. When you murder, you're seeking something else. When you're adultering, when you're all those things, it's looking for something, saying that God is not enough.
Yeah, that is a great point. I think everything links definitely back to the first commandment, that God is God, there's no one else, do not put anything else above him. And if you violate any of these others, including committing murder, then that's going to violate going back to that first command. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on this? Marilyn?
Those are all about harming other people. They do damage. Every single one of them do damage to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. That you trespass against someone else, that you harm them either physically or emotionally. Yep, absolutely. Ed? Yeah. You forgot you already had a mic.
I didn't know if it was on all the time or not.
Yeah.
They're definitely listed in a vertical and horizontal relationship, and there's a prioritization. And it all goes back to correcting the sins that were committed in the Garden of Eden, where they forgot who's who and how to behave.
Okay. Okay.
Very, very essential relationships on how to get along with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that relationship, the first one there, the first commandment, starting about how we internally and externally behave. What our attitude is, and then how we go from there. Right.
And there was, Andrew brought it up, I think, last week or the week before, talk about the various sins, the pride of life, the pride of the eyes, lust, all that.
Yeah.
So these capture all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great point. Rich?
I don't know if it relates to the father and mother because of this, but in creation, we have what man's task is to multiply. And then the recreation of Genesis 9 is one of the places we go to show, well, there's no murder even if you're not a Jew. But there it talks about, again, reproducing. And then in the midst of that discussion, it tells us not to kill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, the importance in the creation, about reproduction and the creation that God has given. Over here, Mark. So we'll have Mark, and then if there's no one else, then I'll give you my thoughts. And again, I'm probably overthinking it, and that's probably why I'm the only one that's going to say it. So Mark?
They're almost circles that you move further out from family. For example, like there's respect for parents, home, authority, and then life, human life. As you interact, as you move out from family into the world, you respect your marriage, right? Or the marriages of others. You respect property. You respect the truth and reputations. But I mean, it's and the last one is interesting because it goes almost, well, they're all inward too, but it kind of picks up, and you got to protect your thought life
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's almost like as you mature and grow and you move out to the world, here's kind of the lines or the boundaries or the territories that you inhabit, and here's how you would properly orient yourself in all those areas.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely an internal and external, right? That there are commands related to our external behaviors, but to your point, the last command, it is definitely internal. What's your attitude? But your first comment there was very similar to what I was thinking, which is if you go in order, the first four are all related to God and our relationship to God and our worshiping of God. God wants everyone to have a relationship with Him. God wants everyone to worship Him, right? The fifth commandment, everyone has parents, right? In theory, right? For you to be alive, you have parents, right? The sixth one, you shall not murder. Everyone is going to interact in this life, right? So you start moving your way outside of that relationship with God, then everyone is going to have a relationship outside of God with others within His creation. Does everybody get married? Not everybody gets married, right? So at least that's I don't know. As I was thinking about it this week, that's at least why I was thinking maybe that's why He gave them in this order, maybe not. But this is an important one for us to understand from the standpoint that He does not, He values His creation. He made His creation for a reason. So we talked, however many weeks ago, looking at these commandments, you can slice and dice these commandments a lot of different ways. But here, as we think about thou shalt not murder, there's a reason I think that He, number one, gave that commandment, and then there's a reason why I think He put it here in this spot for us to think about. Okay? Yeah. Down here, Jeannie.
I was just thinking, our parents are the first people we come in contact with after we're born. And so it's our first authority figures. And so God, it's kind of that order.
Yeah.
There's God and then our parents. And I always told my kids, watch how your girlfriend or your boyfriend treats their parents, because that's how they're going to treat you. And I feel like, what chance do their teachers have or other people in the world have if they're not honoring their parents? They're going to do the same with all authority. Is
Yeah.
typically what we see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Authority and then also our submission to that authority, right? How we interact with that authority. Absolutely. So on the surface, this one sounds pretty straightforward, right? Thou shalt not murder. Just don't kill. Don't murder. Do we have a problem with this commandment today? And I say we. I don't necessarily we as Livingston or we as a church. I'm thinking as a society, whether it's the United States or the world. Do we have a problem? Yes. Okay. Why? Why do we have a problem?
Too many murders.
Ed and then Jill.
There's just a lot of murdering going on
Okay.
all over the world.
Okay. And that's some of the charts that we're going to look at. We're going to look at some stats because this is the first commandment, at least I think, that we can measure. We can actually measure this commandment.
What I've noticed in society nowadays is if you don't like the rule, you redefine all the words. And we have redefined when life begins,
Yep.
when life ends, the value of life, the quality of life. So we just redefined it until it makes it all convenient. And then we're in we're in big trouble.
Yeah, great point. And hold that thought, because we're going to talk about how God defines it, what his definition is. Bob over here. Sorry, making you run tonight.
That's a difficult question that you ask. Do we have a problem with this today? This commandment in Exodus is a different commandment than we have in the New Testament. Yeah. This is murder. But Jesus clearly taught us to turn the other cheek. Mm-hmm. And he didn't say don't murder. He said don't even fight back. Don't resist. Yep. Give them your cloak also. He goes on, Paul did in Romans, 8, or I don't know, I'll find it, that the government is set up for that. The government is the punisher.
Romans 13.
Romans 13.
Yeah.
That we should lift up and edify and obey the government, that the government wields the sword, and I think he's talking about capital punishment personally.
Yep.
And that's the government's thing to do. That's not the Christian's thing to do. The Christian has a commandment to be passive toward others and love them as we love ourselves. So trying to compare that commandment to the New Testament law becomes a very, very difficult task.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're going to dive into that. We probably won't get to it tonight, probably Wednesday night. Talk about what does Jesus say to us, because he says don't even hate your brother. And in fact, if you have something against your brother and you're going to worship, I don't want your worship. You go take care of that with your brother, right? Absolutely.
You could kill him.
Yeah.
Under certain circumstances.
Under certain circumstances. Yep, absolutely. Over here, Sean.
I'm loud, or I can wait for a microphone.
He's coming. He's almost there. And he's literally running.
To your question about today, too, I find it interesting that, to Jill's point, we have to define terms. Yeah. That, for the first time in my life, that's people we're talking about. We're talking about killing people, not animals or plants or this or that or the other. This is, it's getting back to, I was reading a book recently, and it was talking about different groups, how they wage war in your mind and ideas. And one of the ways they do that is by making it so that you can't understand the terms with which you're using. It's ambiguous. You can't communicate with anyone anymore. Yeah. And it's clearly, and here we're talking about killing people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's look at some stats. Again, Bob makes a very great point on the distinction. So if we think just within this command, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, and we're going to dive into what the meaning of that is as well, as we talked about with the definitions. I pulled some charts that show two different stats. I'm going to read here just so that I don't miss anything. So these are murder rates or homicide rates. And this is from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. And this is a chart showing homicide rates per 100,000 individuals, per 100,000 people. So as I did some research on this, apparently to normalize or be able to compare country to country, they look at murder rates, homicide rates over 100,000 people so that you can see what the trends are. So this is data from 1990 to 2016, and again, this is globally. So in 2017, so the year after this chart, it says global homicides were just under 5.5 per 100,000 people, or that equates to about 464,000 homicides in total, so about 500,000. So keep that number in mind, 5.5. So 5.5 homicides per 100,000 people. In comparison, this institute said in the 13th and 14th centuries, homicide rates in Western Europe, so you think about 13th, 14th century, what was going on, medieval times, a lot of battles going on, fiefdoms, etc. So homicide rates in Western Europe were over 10 per 100,000 people. So from the 13th and 14th century, so that's 1200 to 1300, to today, it's cut in half almost. Today, homicide rates in European countries are around 1 per 100,000. So again, this chart is global. The stats we're diving, per country, per region. So in Europe, it went from 10. Globally, it's 5.5. Today in Western Europe, it's 1 per 100,000 people. So keep those numbers in your head. And then it says nearly 40% of global homicides are linked to organized crime or gang violence. So almost 50% of it is gangs or organized crime, okay? So this is global. So was 10, now it's 5. In Europe today, it's about 1. So now this is a chart that shows the US. And again, I'm going to walk through this. It might be a little hard to see. So this is US homicide rates. This is data from the Council on Criminal Justice. And again, this chart is showing murder rates or homicide rates per 100,000 people, okay? So keep these stats in mind. So remember on the global chart, we saw this steep decline. Here's the US chart. So it's high and then it comes down and then it kind of flattens out. So this is data from 1960 to 2022. So a little over 60 years worth of data. So in 2022, there were 6.3 homicides per 100,000 people in the US. That equates to about 21,781 homicides. So remember, globally it was 5.5, US 6.3, so the US is higher. In 2023, so that's the year after this chart. So in 2023, there were 19,252 reported homicides. So that's about 5.7. So it went from 6.3 down to about 5.7. So it came down close to the global average. So if you look at the data between 1990 to 2023, just on a numbers basis, not per 100,000, but on a numbers basis, the number is anywhere between, the homicides are between 14,000 to 25,000 per year. So order of magnitude, you can see about 14,000 to 25,000 per year. So in these numbers are what they call justifiable homicides. So justifiable homicides are homicides of military or police or self-defense. So if you have to defend yourself, and by doing so, the other person is killed. So that's a small number according to this data. It says that justifiable homicides are just 700 to 800 per year. So it's not a whole lot that are in that number. So again, if you look at this chart, you see about the middle, just to the left of the middle of the chart, that's where it peaks in 1980. So in 1980, the murders per 100,000 or homicides per 100,000 in the US were 10.2. So that goes back to that 13th and 14th century number in Europe. The United States had the highest homicide rate of the G7 countries between 2000 and 2021. And then as of 2023, the US was the only country outside of Mexico to have a city rated in the top 7 most dangerous cities. So US and Mexico had the most dangerous cities reported. So those are just I was just curious to see, how we as a society, particularly in the US, how big of an issue is this with murder? You know what the sad thing is about these stats? I think to where Jill was going, this does not include abortion, either in the global numbers or in the US numbers. So again, for class purposes, this isn't our main topic, but again, I thought this was heartbreaking as I studied this. So per the CDC in 2022, these are just reported abortions. So not all abortions are reported. In 2022, there were 609,360 reported abortions. So that is about 11.2 abortions per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44, and the abortion rate was about 199 abortions per 1,000 lives birthed. So the murder rate was like, what do we say, 14,000 to 25,000? And the abortions are 600,000. Do you know what the number is globally? I don't think you'll even be able to guess. Any guesses what the number is? 73 million, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization. When I read that one, that really broke my heart. You know, I thought it was bad enough here in the US, but then to read globally that the number is 73 million. And that's 73 million per year that is happening. So, and to Bob's point, there's a distinction. New Testament law, Old Testament law. Old Testament law, I think we have a problem with this. We still have a problem with this. Okay? Any questions, comments on this before we move on? Yeah.
I do think it's interesting. Around 1963, it starts a sharp incline. Well, what happened in 1963? They took prayer out of school, and they've been taking God out of society pretty much ever since. But cause and effect, I don't know, but I think it's too much of a coincidence to ignore.
Yeah, great point. Yep. I'm sorry?
Is that when the free love started?
Yeah, yeah, yep, in the 60s, yep. Do we have another comment? Yeah, Peter?
I'm thinking about the disregard for life that leads you to murder. And so, well, when you start including that, the number is staggeringly high. And we have atrocities and wars that have numbered in the, well, tens and 20s of millions of people that have been killed over the last century in those kinds of battles. And currently today, we're fighting wars on all kinds of fronts, which falls into the category of, well, at least taking life, right? And we can debate whether that's murder or not. But then you have the drug epidemic, and you have people overdosing on all kinds of painkillers, and people seemingly, you know, not really caring as much as they ought to about those kinds of problems that are causing, you know, lots of our young people to lose their lives through misuse of prescription medications and a variety of other things. And we all seem to be turning our, turning a blind eye to that kind of reality. So I think that your numbers are, staggering and are probably hugely understated as far as how many people are dying from reckless behavior on the part of well-meaning but not caring people all across the world.
And not regarding the sanctity of life as they should, right? Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to, I'm sorry, I can't remember who made the comment, but it goes back to the first commandment, to honor God. That if you honor God as you should, you honor life as you should, right? All right, so let's keep going. So he says in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 13, you shall not murder, thou shalt not murder. So we can see that murder is still a problem today. We've talked about how murder fits within the Ten Commandments. So let's talk about, in some translations, I think the King James in particular, it uses the word kill there, right? It says, you shall not kill. I think other translations, like the New King James, the New American Standard, or the ESV, they translate it as do not murder, thou shalt not murder. So we can see that with that word, I'm going to look here just to make sure I'm saying this the right way. The Hebrew word is ratzak, R-A-T-S-A-C-H. And that word primarily refers to an unlawful or malicious killing. So it's not just taking life, but it's an unlawful or malicious killing. So that's what that word means there. So when you think of this command, particularly whether it's related to us today, with the New Testament law, or you think about in the Old Testament law, what has jumped out to you? What do you think about when you think about this sixth commandment? Thou shalt not murder. And it could be some of the things that we talked about already, but what is it? How does this relate to us today? What are the connections that you have, or what do you see with this today? Arlene? Oh, we'll come to you next. Go ahead, Arlene.
I've heard it said that a society that allows and condones the killing of innocents, these are the same people that go crazy, the people that are pro-choice, I'll just be kind, the ones that are pro-choice are also the ones that are out there protesting when a well-known criminal, a convicted criminal, is on death row. They're the ones that are talking about the sanctity of life for somebody who has committed heinous crimes. But the saying goes that a society that allows the killing of innocents and of the aged, because that's the next category of people, what is it? Now I'm forgetting the term for medical suicide, basically.
Yeah.
So again, that's where we really have the alarms. There is no value to life.
Yeah.
So once you allow that, then what would we expect? We expect there to be happiness going on and brotherly love? No, not at all. There's no value to life.
Yeah, the sanctity of life. Yep. Rich, did you have something? No? Okay. All right. Okay, so there are three things that I wanted to look at, and we won't be able to finish this tonight, but between tonight and Wednesday night, three things to look at, which is number one, the sanctity of life, which Eileen, I think that what you were saying there, the value of life. What is that, and why is that so important to God, and how does God demonstrate that? And again, if we try to put ourselves here in Exodus, what do these people have? What would have been revealed to them up to this point? So we'll look at that, what the sanctity is. Then what are the laws that are regarding human life? That if we go beyond Exodus, and if we look particularly at Leviticus and also Numbers, there are some specific laws that are given about life. So what are those? And then how does that translate to us when it comes to respecting human life as a Christian, as Bob was highlighting? Did someone over here have a comment? Yeah, Mark.
I think you were asking what you see in here, right? And it goes back to the abortion. In Psalm 139, David talks about that in his mother's womb, he wasn't in it was he. God saw his unformed substance, etc. But then he goes on and says something else, and it's just not respect for the physical life that is there, because if that's all that's there, really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That there's a soul there, and in Psalm 139, David talks about even before he was born, in God's book, all his days were written, and that there was a certain destiny or plan. Jeremiah is told the same thing. I knew you before you were even born.
Yep.
And that the taking of innocent human life is not only showing complete disrespect for the value of that person, you are also ending a destiny that God had in mind. And I mean, you think about things like that among the over 1 million that we abort in this country every year. Did we get rid of the person that was going to cure cancer? Did we get rid of future presidents and great statesmen and great preachers and great elders? And what have we done? Is that obviously you can't get rid of 73 million people a year and not suffer something as a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Great point. Jessica?
Maybe you can help me chew on this. When you were reflecting on the difference between the Hebrew word meaning a malicious act, there's a lot of killing that happens in the Old Testament. There's sacrifice after sacrifice. And I was trying to look real quick. I mean, we've already seen Abraham take Isaac up, and that's human life, and he was following God's command, and it didn't end up to be Isaac that died, but there's killing that happens over and over again throughout the New Testament, just trying to think about their perspective on this commandment, that there were times that death needed to happen in order for things to be purified or those kind of things, but it was never to be an ill intent from your heart, that there was hate or other things like that involved.
Yeah. I think there's to your point, I think there's a couple things there. Number one, as God tells us, whatever, especially in Hebrews, whenever there is sin, there needs to be a sacrifice, right? There needs to be blood. And he has put that in place for us. But it was never intended, in the old law for it to be a human sacrifice, right? I mean, you look at where Israel kind of strayed when they started sacrificing their children, right? And giving their children up. And God punished them for that. But then on the other side, which we'll look at, we'll see if we get to it tonight, particularly in Leviticus, in Numbers, he's very particular in what type of killing, right? Because God himself provided justice and judgment by taking the lives of people who had sinned, right? Who had gone away and perverted what he wanted. But when it comes to us acting as individuals, he has given very specific laws about how we are to act, right? So that's at least the way I'm thinking about it. Any other comments? Yeah, Peter.
Caleb, I'm having a really hard time with this matter, separating it from matters of the heart. And even in the Old Testament, because when Jesus comes and clarifies this in Matthew 5, we know that Jesus didn't change the law. So when he stated that I'm not talking about physically just murdering, I'm talking about saying that you hate your brother or that you're a fool. And then I looked at that word a little bit too, and I saw there seems to be some kind of like a rash intent in this idea of murder in this word. So, it seems to be more than just, you have malice, and that malice grows the way it did inside of Cain, so that he would have the audacity then to strike his brother down because of what jealousy or anger at God or whatever it was that he was feeling. And so as we read this command, it must be more than just striking someone down. It must be all kinds of matters of the heart that even God is talking about here, and he's asking the Jewish people to look deeper than just the act.
Yep. And in fact, to that point, let's jump ahead. So Ed, can you read Leviticus, where is it? Leviticus 19, 9 to 18, and then 32 to 37. So Leviticus 19, 9 to 18, 32 to 37. And while everybody's turning there and while Ed gets that reading ready, to your point, Peter, Jesus said, you have heard, thou shalt not murder, but I say, don't hate, right? Even in Leviticus chapter 19, God is saying, don't hate your brother. And then we're probably not going to get to it tonight, but in Numbers, which we'll look at Wednesday night, there is that distinction of when you maliciously kill your brother, when you murder your brother, that's where the punishment comes in. But if it's an accident or if it just happens as, I think our author calls it horseplay, right? An accident that happens, then that is something that's very different. So I think even though Jesus, because of what the Jewish leaders of his day had taken this to mean, he went back and said, it's been there the whole time. I think it was there the whole time. And I think God had given to his people what he means by this. So Ed, are you ready? Leviticus chapter 19. And what did I tell you? Start in verse 9.
9 to 18 and then 32 to 37.
Yep.
In 19:9, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not deceive one another. Do not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not defraud your neighbor or rob him Do not hold back the wages of a hired man overnight. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in his guilt. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And that's 18, and then
Yeah,
going
and then
down
32.
To 32. Rise in the presence of the aged. Right place. Show respect for the elderly and revere your God. I am the Lord. When an alien lives with you in your land, do not mistreat him. The alien living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were aliens in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Do not use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales and honest weights, an honest ephah and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Keep all of my decrees and keep all my laws and follow them. I am the Lord.
Yep. So Leviticus was given right as the people were there at Sinai. That was part of what's given here with the Ten Commandments. And so back to Peter's point, it's been here all along. Don't hate your brother, verse 17, right? And look at all the other things there that he says in Leviticus 19. How are they to take care of one another? Love your neighbor as yourself. When you go and glean your harvest from your field, leave some of it behind to help take care of your brother. All these specific actions. And we're going to talk Wednesday night that all of these commandments where he says, thou shalt not, whatever, we should also look at it as thou shalt. So if I'm not supposed to do this, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to love my brother? How am I supposed to take care of them? So that attitude about loving one another and taking care of one another, helping one another, supporting one another, it was there in the old law. It was there from the beginning. So even though this commandment was thou shalt not murder, there were some other laws that were around that about how they were to live. So we're almost out of time. We didn't even make it through the introduction. I'm sorry. I talked too much. All right. So what we're going to do for Wednesday night is we'll finish on this, on outlining, what are these three main points that we need to talk about. And we'll dive in. And the first one on the sanctity of life. What I'd like you to do for Wednesday night is go back in the book of Genesis. And if you look at the book of Genesis in creation, what is the distinction in creation of God creating the plants and the animals and then creating us, creating man and woman? What do we see in the language that shows a difference between that? And if there's anything that jumps out at you. And then as a result of that, what is man's response? How does man see throughout the book of Genesis the sanctity of life? I went through the book of Genesis and I cheated. I went into the beginning of Exodus. But if you go from Genesis to the beginning of Exodus, I can count at least 10 times where there's either a murder or it talks about murder in someone's heart. So see if you can find those 10 times. And so by the time we get to Exodus chapter 20, where he's giving the law, the 10 commandments, he absolutely needed to give this law because man had already fallen off and was not following and not honoring and not giving the honor, respect, and sanctity to life that God had intended. So those are the assignments for Wednesday night. And then also we'll try to get to some of the questions in the book, which one of them is directly what Bob was talking about, Romans chapter 13. Look at Romans chapter 13 and about what is the role of government when it comes to capital punishment and how murder is supposed to be handled today. What is God's intent with that? Okay? So that's what we'll talk about Wednesday night. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, your questions, and your comments.
going to be goodness of God. Do so mi. Blessed be your name. Do so.